What's going on, guys? Evan the Elden Ring enthusiast here, bringing you another Elden Ring gameplay commentary. It has been a long time since I've done anything in post-game commentary, so I'm really looking forward to this. I hope you enjoy it. If there is a demand for more of these, I will probably take the time to try to do these maybe once a week or so. But anyway, what are we actually working on? So, we are building a faith character. So, a little bit about me as a player. I suffer from the chronic character restarter syndrome. So basically, anytime I start a character, if I feel like I've made a mistake, if I feel like I don't like the way I'm doing it, if I just get bored with the build, I'm like, I know, I'll start a new build. And then I'm also sort of on the mentality of, I should clearly delete the build that I'm currently playing. This happens all the time for me. Or I'll take a break from Elden Ring to go play other things, go play MechWarrior, some of the things you see on this channel. I just get busy. When you think about the history of kind of this YouTube experience, I was making videos a long time ago. I never really grew my channel because I was an inconsistent uploader for whatever reason, lack of talent. Whatever it may be, the reality is, since then I've gotten married, I'm working a full-time job that's, so on and so forth, right? It's hard to find the time, so I put video games down, and I come back, I'm like, I don't remember where this character is. Where are these NPC quest lines and things like that? Like, simple solution, I'll just start a new character. So I can come up with probably 10,000 reasons I start new characters. This is worse for me with Elden Ring, because it's so much easier to lose track of what you're doing because the world is so vast. It's open world, and it's Souls. The content is very well hidden, there's no quest markers, things like that. The things that make the Souls games great, including Elden Ring, are also the same things that make it really incredibly difficult for me to pick up characters midway. So I've been taking notes and things like that, and I actually, the older I get, the more nerdy I get. I start to really enjoy spreadsheets and things like that to track my progress, saved character builders. I used to just commit all this stuff to memory back when I was playing the old Souls games in my head. So, that is to say, my first character I started on Elden Ring was actually going to be a prophet. So a faith-based character, prophet class. Starting classes, of course, aren't a whole lot of identity, and I kind of abandoned the build, so I figured, why not go back? I've platinumed the game. Let's go back and do something that's sort of an incantation caster. That should be interesting and fun, right? So you are looking at my take on what is the look. In my opinion, I'm going to play this in the way that I think is intentional. So if you want to see someone do kind of a guided playthrough of how to build a faith character and complete the game as a faith character, I think this would be a pretty good series to watch. Now, a couple things you won't see in these uploads. So there are skips, there are exploits, all sorts of things like that to make this game a lot easier. I don't intend to use any of those. I will try to use good pathing through the game world. I will try to be true to kind of my take on what I want a faith character to be. But I'm not going to do all the progression breaks. I'm not going to do everything you can to make the game easier. There is a lot of one-off videos out there, great resources for this game, that kind of show you, if you're struggling, here's how to make it easier. So that isn't the video for you. This is probably what would look like a logical, unpracticed, but still familiar run-through of the Elden Ring experience as seen through a Faithcaster. So with this upload, I will get some sort of imager file in the build description that has the final target build so that folks know where you're going to wind up. Because if you're following this build closely, if you're following these videos closely, I wouldn't worry too much about grabbing every item I grab. I wouldn't worry too much about getting every little ingredient. Like, it's not that specific, right? This isn't like a speedrun strat where you're going to need precisely these items. This will be roughly a 25-minute upload that really is going to grab a whole bunch of superfluous items and things I want for later, or things I just wanted to do. Now, that said, there are going to be some key items in this video that I'll try to point out as we reach them, and of course, target build at the end. So right now, we're going to go get a pickled fowl foot, which you could eat to get a ton of extra ruins for certain boss and things like that. I think it's 20% or something like that. So the biggest priority for me when I start a new character is getting strong enough to reasonably bring down the Clean Rot Knights, because I absolutely want Golden Scarab early. I want early levels. I want early XP. And so that's what we're building towards. And for me, the quickest way to do that, outside of some sort of exploitative method or summoning, is, get fire damage. They are weak to fire. So That's what I'm working on. Maybe get some spirit summons, etc. And I'm just trying to build a functional character that can clear the first couple bosses, things like that. Level up wise, not really too specific on the early levels for me. I like to take my strength to whatever the level required is for the weapon I'm going to be using in the future, provided it's just not like ungodly high. And for this build, we're going to use the Knight Rider's Glaive. I absolutely love the halberd class weapon in Elden Ring. Halberds have been great the entirety of the Soul series, in my opinion. I love using them. I'm a straight sword guy, I'm a rapier guy, and I'm a halberd guy. So this build is going to have access to all those different weapon classes with emphasis on Knight Rider's Glaive. And I'm probably going to put Black Flame Tornado on it because it is an awesome weapon art. It's fun. You can build around it. So there's probably a lot of really good Black Flame Tornado videos on YouTube. That's what we're shooting for, only we're not going to min-max it. It's not going to be super optimized. It's going to be a little bit more well-rounded because I like to mix up my weapons and keep the game interesting. So, once again, early strength for me, we're targeting, 18 because I don't like one-handed glaive or halberd movesets very much. And so, as a result, we only need 18 to dual-hand the thing, dual-wield it. Oops, just got a phone call. I had to pause and restart there. So suffice it to say, we need 10 dexterity, 18 strength, and that is our stat spread for the bulk of the weapons we'll be using. Now, I also like to carry a shield for parries and things like that. Now, obviously, if you're two-handing, you can't really use your shield, so it's going to be strapped to your back, but considering the build will probably also have access to a straight sword and things like that, I'm anticipating using, at 18 strength, probably the brass shield. I love the weight to defense ratio on it. I think it looks cool. And it's nice and available early. Those knights walking around in camp right there carry brass shield. So you can farm it early. A lot of players do. If you're going to have the strength to carry one and you're not two-handing, I would probably advise just about everybody to go in on the brass shield. It's fantastic and I really like it. So other things we're going to be looking at here is, we're going to need a lot of faith, and the nice thing is if we take our strength to 18 early, in future uploads, we're definitely going to go grab a Radagon Soar Seal, which, for those who are not familiar with it, it gives a huge stat boost across your character in exchange for receiving more damage. So I love it early game. Certain builds wear it for the entirety of their existence. I'm not one of those people. I don't really like to be tied into any talents. I like to be able to swap around like that. So that kind of forces me away from perfect min-maxes on pretty much every build. You'll see that we switched over to two-handed longsword here, greatsword. I cannot stand the spear moveset in Elden Ring. I'm not into it. Probably the only Souls game where I've really enjoyed spears on the whole is probably Demon Souls. I do love a good old wing spear in Demon Souls, but we're not playing Demon Souls. We haven't uploaded that footage in a long time, and I don't see myself going back to it. Which, this is an Elden Ring commentary, but what I'll say for those of you who are wondering why I never seem to be able to finish Demon Souls playthroughs, I love playing Demon Souls. I hate covering all the content in Demon Souls. Demon Souls is the game, for me, that has some amazing points in it, and then a ton of areas I just can't stand to replay. Like, I have entire zones that are like Blight Town for me. So, I guess, and I'm not just talking about 5-1. Okay, so back to Elden Ring. Start as a prophet, you get free flasks, basically, in the form of extra heals at the beginning. It is super convenient. I do think Prophet with access to miracles is one of the better starter classes, provided you know where to go find a better shield and a better weapon, which is really easy right at the start. You can buy them from vendors. There's chests that contain 100% physical block shields. Prophet, you can round out the problems with the class at the beginning, being its worthless shield and what I think is a pretty lousy starter weapon, really quickly, actually. Probably the best starter character is, like, I don't know, obviously if you're doing magic. Sorcerer is pretty good. Glintstone Sorceries, Meteorite Staff, etc. So, but this is a Prophet. So we done come here, we got the Whetblade. That's really all we needed from this camp. Now, I like to clear the camp for fun. I do play the game, to fight enemies and things like that. You could warp out of here now. You have everything you need. This is just kind of bonus footage. Like I said, we're not doing a speedrun here. So, like this guy. There is absolutely no reason you have to take this guy out other than for your personal pride and some runes. And there's much better ways to get runes early. Some are exploitative and others are just, more efficient methods of farming. You can also farm your brass shield here. I probably will at a certain point come back off camera and do some farming. That's another thing is when you're doing a long play like this, I do like to edit a little bit, so you'll probably see some warps where there's some missing time, if you will. But that's okay. We're going to capture everything that's important for you to see. The missing time stuff is usually just me goofing around, honestly getting lost, like, how do I get up this cliff again? Things like that. A lot of elements in Elden Ring I get stuck trying to figure out, how do I get up this cliff? I'm stuck, right? Which is pretty common in the Elden Ring experience. Or I'll try to remember, like, how do I get this memory stone? What's the puzzle? Where are the turtles? And I'll edit those down to show you only the best bits. Otherwise, at this point, we've got a decent weapon. We've cleared some areas. We've got map fragments. We've got some good bonfires here. Graces, of course, in the Elden Ring experience. So try to use my time efficiently, because most areas you're going to come back to, so I try to hit all the graces around an area I'm in. But I'm sure sometimes I will miss them, because I don't have them all memorized. I mean, there is an absolute ton of things to do in this game. So at this point, what we're actually riding out to do is we want to get some early upgrade stones, and we want to get a vow that will let us put holy scaling on our weapons. So there is a knight early in the game that carries an Ash of War, which is basically your weapon ability, not to be confused with a spell, but it uses FP like a spell. Basically a spell on your weapon. I've been around in the Souls games for a while now, and featured prominently in Elden Ring with a huge variety of different variations of it. So, we want to get something that scales on holy damage, because there's a high probability we're going to put a lot of points into Faith this build at a pretty early time. Gone are the days where you could make a weapon Chaos or Fire, like in the old Souls games, where all the scaling doesn't come from your stats, it's just innately on the weapon, letting you pump, your endurance and your vitality, your vigor, support stats like that that are just good on every character. Can't do that anymore, and I kind of miss those days, but I get why they took them out, so we are going to have to put some points into Faith to get some good weapons scaling. Which creates sort of an interesting problem I think a lot of players experience with Elden Ring, where I think probably the most valuable stat to pump early on any character is Vigor. The returns you get on Vigor early are fantastic. Having HP to not get one shot feels better. And if you're learning boss fights, which if you're struggling, you're going to be learning some boss fights, it sucks to die in 1 or 2 hits. You don't get a lot of time to practice. You're not going to be able to DPS it anyway. If you DPS race it, if you're going to die in 2 hits and you're trying to flask and things like that. So, strongly recommend early Vigor. I definitely go short on it. And here is the enemy we need. He will drop us an Ash of War that will change the scaling on whatever weapon we put it on. That Faith scaling, considering the Prophet starts with a great deal of Faith, this will keep those stat points from being wasted. Because we don't really have good offensive miracles right now, so those points need to go into something to make the game not miserable. And in this case, Golden Vow will let those scale into damage. Now, couple things that kind of sucks about holy damage. A lot of the bosses that are difficult in this game, in general, are very resistant to holy damage. And the final boss, I think, is nearly outright immune, if not immune to holy damage. So if you're going to play a Faith build, you're going to have a ton of weapons that scale with holy damage, which in certain areas can be really convenient. But in all the end-game areas, it actually won't be convenient at all. It will just be a complete letdown. So it's important to have alternatives. Faith has access to a ton of different damage types, namely fire and holy, but also good physical damage. So it's not a big deal. Faith is actually an excellent build to go through the game with, but it does require some game knowledge. Otherwise, you're going to get your in-game weapon, and you're just going to scratch the paint on these bosses. So holy damage, situationally very good. In general, not great. So I look forward to getting a flame weapon incantation on a weapon as quickly as possible so we can scale our fire damage. You'll also see I'm skipping an optional boss here. We will come back for it later. I'm not really stressing out on this playthrough of being like, I want to demonstrate my skill. I can beat this boss at low soul levels. I can beat this boss undergeared. So it's interesting to think about that as YouTube has evolved, because I am capable of doing a lot of those things, more so in other Souls games than Elden Ring. I am probably the worst at Elden Ring and Sekiro of the FromSoft titles. As a big Armored Core player, I've been playing FromSoft games most of my life, and I've got to report, Elden Ring and Sekiro just didn't really jive for me from like I'm good at the game, but I'm definitely passable and probably above average on Elden Ring. I bring that up to say there is no need for me to torment myself, and you as a player, there's no need to torment yourself trying to prove that you can do something, unless that's what you're into. Because when you think about creating content on YouTube these days, right? If you're not selling your stylistic approach and trying to sell like raw talent, start looking up speedruns, start looking at 100% runs, start looking at people that, are streaming the game 10, 12 hours a day and are just so ridiculously good. It would be difficult to compete on the axis of skill with those players. I cannot compete on that axis. Probably never will. That is not the axis for me. So what we're doing here is we're getting some quick early upgrade materials. That's another thing that can try to trick out players early in Elden Ring. When you start fighting bosses you don't know that well, if your weapons aren't upgraded, you don't feel like you're doing any damage, because you're not. I would strongly advise upgrading weapons whenever you can. And this is a real bummer for me, because for whatever reason, I have a psychological aversion, right, to this idea of I'm gonna farm me some weapons. I don't want to do that. I want to use stones on weapons I'm going to use forever. So all these early game weapons, I don't like to upgrade them because they're not going to be used for me in the future, which is silly. Ultimately, the smithing stones you would use early game to upgrade these weapons become so plentiful they are essentially worthless. And yet, I still don't like to do it. So I wind up sort of torturing myself with +0 weapons into the mid-game, waiting for, my first. I would have this as a swap. It's silly. I'm going to try to break that habit on this character, partly to just sort of break some of my own faulty psychology here, my stuck points, but also to just make life a little bit easier. We'll probably also get some early game summons that are pretty busted. You can fight boss without summons. Personally, I like to fight boss without summons. I think it's more fun, but sometimes if you're just going to try to get your progression going, spirit summons just make it so much more tolerable. I've always felt like, too, if the boss is going to double team you, it totally makes sense to summon a buddy, right? So, once again, also in this camp, you're really here for that shield, because that's a 100% resistance to physical shield, which will replace that god-awful shield on my back. You don't actually do this. You could just farm a brass shield and really skip this camp entirely. But it was right there, and, I decided to clear it. Really for the heck of it. At this point, you could have grabbed the shield, got on Torrent, rode out of here, and done a warp out, and that would be fine. There is absolutely nothing you need in this camp. So this is going to just be a couple minutes of just playing the game, totally unnecessary to stay. Your next destination is going to be probably the next bonfire and a bridge. Basically, we're trying to gather all the good early game stuff we can without progressing, way out of order. Because obviously, you could just skip Stormville Castle entirely and go get some real good in-game stuff. I don't like to do that. I like to say sort of south of the castle and do everything you can do on that side of the map and not break progression in that way. Makes it a little bit harder, but I do think it actually makes it more enjoyable. Not just from a challenge yourself perspective, but just from a linearity perspective. I like a good open world game, but to a point, I actually think I'm more of a linear player in these sort of action RPGs. Once again, I do like the idea of being able to roam around and go where I want, but this idea of a huge world where you can go to all these different places, that kind of throws me off. I do like the old formula FromSoft had presented, and I hope one day we can go back to it. But the success of this game has just been staggering, and it's quite an achievement as a game. I consider Elden Ring to just be a monumental creation of video gaming, but that doesn't mean it's kind of my favorite in the series, and it certainly isn't. Once we get our mandatory strength, I think the next thing we're going to jump into on this build is, we'll have our base stats for our weapons, and then we're going to start to put some time into some vigor, some endurance, and then some faith. We'll try to sort of scale those equally to what our needs are. I like to have enough vigor that I don't feel like I'm dying a couple hits from just every mob I see. Like right now, I could take, 4 or 5 hits from this big guy, and I'd be alright, so we don't feel any need to do that. I think this is actually one of the most enjoyable parts of playing a character. The gameplay loop isn't too terribly difficult, but you're still weak enough as a character that you've got to be careful. You can't just be completely effortless. So I am definitely lost right now. I am trying to see, can I torrent up on top of that to grab that item? I don't remember what it is. I know it isn't essential to this character or really any other. I think it's just a more plentiful common item, but it's there and I want it. This is another thing with me. I'm sort of a completionist. I like to grab every item in an area. You know, if you watch some of my old content from years ago, you'll see I'm always trying to grab every piece of loot. And why? I mean, most of these items were useless, like grabbing these flowers and things. It's like some sort of kleptomaniac problem. So here's Alexander. I think Alexander is an awesome character. Giant jar man. So we need to punch him on the bottom so that we can flip over his... get him out of this hole because he'd be stuck. And we want to get him out. That way we can continue his quest line. I do want to try to hit as many NPC quest lines during these uploads as I can so that folks can see and I don't miss them. Now you'll see right now I'm not two-handing the sword because I just equipped my new shield and I'm pretty excited about that. Only to remember I don't actually have the strength to wield this weapon without two-handing. So that's why this isn't working. I'm basically just wailing on Alexander. There we go. Two-hand it and get it taken care of pretty much immediately. Exalted Flesh. Eventually we will need to finish Alexander's quest line in order to get one of our in-game talismans, the Jar of Alexander. But ultimately you can do Alexander's quest after finishing the game, which I always kind of favored as a game design perspective, this idea of it's not missable. Missable content in a game this large has always been a major turnoff for me. I accept there's always going to be some, but the idea that you can miss very important sort of build-defining items if you break sequence or miss an area or you miss some really awesome dialogue, that's a bit of a turnoff for me. I didn't mind it as much in the old Souls games when, once again, it's very linear, it's difficult to miss things. This is different. So we're running over here to go grab a filler talisman. We have an empty talisman slot. I think I might as well get something. I think the Lance Talisman is over here. It increases damage on horseback, which is actually fairly useful early in the game, or if you just fight on horse a lot. I mean, there's always going to be better options than it, but it is totally fine as a filler. It's interesting, some of the early game talismans you can find even if you aren't going to a specific one. Probably the best talisman for archery is near the beginning of the game at Gatefront, so that's pretty cool. I've always kind of wanted there to be a truly viable archer build in the Souls games. You can definitely make them work, and they are not that bad, but I think it would just be interesting for there to be kind of the, I don't know, like I'm all archer all the time. Some sort of bow that doesn't require arrows would be neat. I don't know, there's a lot of design decisions they could make. I get why they don't. They're the experts, not me. They're just, you know, thinking out loud. So this scarab here, you got to be careful because there's a in-placed archer here with a ballista that can one-shot you if it gets a critical hit, or you just have low vigor, which either could be true for this character. So up here is our first gateway boss, right? This is the boss that everybody got stuck on, initially, including me. So we won't be fighting that boss in this upload. We're actually going up here to get to the Round Table Hold, which is pretty much where our content will start next time. I hope you enjoyed watching. I appreciate your attention, and I'll see you next time.